Hey, Hickok 45 here. We're going to do a video today with a 22 long rifle. Well, 22 rifle. It actually will fire 22 long rifle, 22 long, or 22 short. I get a lot of requests to do 22 videos, and I think I've just done one maybe. But I do like the 22. I have several of them, and we do shoot them. I just kind of neglect it, I guess, in the YouTube video world. Don't mean to. This particular gun is very, very special. I guess I'm in kind of a nostalgic trip lately, you know, with my old 44 and everything. But this gun, speaking of vintage guns and guns that have a lot of sentimental value, this one has a great deal of it. This is the first firearm I ever fired, other than a BB gun. So this is the first real gun I fired. It is a Ward's Western Field 47C. It's a fairly old gun. These were made back in like the 30s and 40s, maybe even early 50s. Don't know exactly the date this gun was manufactured, but it's a 47C. Mossberg made these for Montgomery Ward. I think they made some for Sears, and it was purchased, I'm sure, at Montgomery Ward by somebody. My father bought it from a friend of ours, and we were living up in northern Kentucky. He bought it in around 1950, around when I was born, and it's the first gun I remember having. In fact, it was the only rifle or handgun that I grew up with until age about 10, when, as I told you in the other video, my mother bought my father that 22 pistol. So this was the only real gun that was around. Didn't even have a shotgun, either one. And then when I was about 12 or 13, my father gave it to me, and it became my gun. And I brought this rack out. It's not exactly beautiful walnut or anything, it's some old maple. This is the gun rack that hung in my bedroom when I was 12 or 13. This gun was on it just like this. So I thought that might be of some interest to you. I know that a lot of us have grown up with 22s, and we have a lot of 22 history. So I thought that might, be of some interest to you. Just like bringing out the box and stuff for the old Model 29. All of us that have any age on us, we've got things we think about: guns that got away, guns we traded, guns we shouldn't have traded, guns that we grew up with, guns we had in our room. Because back when I was young, and many of you were young, having a gun in your room was just commonplace. You heard the stories of people who took their guns to school, in fact, and maybe left it in the principal's office because they were going hunting that afternoon. That's just the way it used to be. So this was in my room. This was my gun, and I was able to shoot it when we lived on the farm, especially. Just take it out and shoot it whenever I wanted. To tell you a little more of the history and how stupid I was, somehow at one point when I was young, the scope was not on it. It had broken and come apart, and many of those years it did not have the scope. And somehow I put it on the rack the wrong way, and it got in a bind, and the trigger guard broke. It's probably 14 or 15, I don't know exactly. And so the trigger guard was totally broken off for a fairly long period of time. The scope, I don't know, it got off, came off, we took off or something. It was kind of a cheap scope. So most of that time I was shooting it without a trigger guard and without sights, really, just lining up with a little screw on the end of the barrel. If the cameraman will come over and kind of do a little close-up on it, you'll see what I mean. It just has a screw on the front end of the barrel for a front sight. And I remember the very first time I ever shot it, the scope wasn't right. I would have been about 10 and or 11. We moved to the farm, 10 I guess. And my brother handed it to me. He said, just line it. We had a little plastic army man sitting on a fence post, I recall. He said, just try to line up that screw, on the target. And lo and behold, I hit it the first shot, and I was hooked, I guess. I don't know after that how many times I hit things, but I was hooked when I hit that first shot. So that's how this gun came into my experience, with no scope and with no real metallic sight on it other than that screw on the front end. So the gun was in kind of bad repair for a number of years. It needed refinishing. Someone had gotten, I think, sprinkled paint on it when they were painting the room at some point. It had some surface rust on it. The scope was gone. The nickel had flicked off the bolt. It was in pretty bad shape. So what I did in the 80s, it sat in my closet in my attic for a long time. In the 80s, I just went ahead and spent some money on it, and mainly because I found a trigger guard. I figured out through some research that Mossberg made the gun, and so I checked with Numeric Arms. I think they're called Gun Parts Incorporated now or something. They actually had a trigger guard for it. As you can see, that's a pretty involved trigger guard. That's not something that I had even thought about trying to make one, hiring a dentist to make one. It was very involved. It would have been to make one. But I found one, and when I found that trigger guard and it was the right one and it fit, well, that's when I got going. I refinished the stock, bought a scope, had the bolt nickeled, had the barrel, had the rest of it blued, and got a new strap for it, because this was the same kind of strap my dad had on it. So anyway, gun has been refurbished mostly by me, and of course by a gunsmith. So 22 Ward's Western Field, as it says on the barrel, number 47C, 22 short, long rifle. Okay, so let's take a few shots with this baby. Put some bullets in it. Now this is one of those guns that has a tubular magazine, and many of you are familiar with that, of course. You got to put the bullets in the tube this way. You don't have a magazine that clips up or feeds up underneath the gun, as some centerfire rifles and some 22 rifles have. You just let them fall down into the tube. There's a few safety concerns because of that, because you find yourself doing something you don't really want to do if you're very conscious of gun safety. That is getting your knuckles, your fingers in front of the muzzle. But if you have the bolt back, as I do, and it's totally unloaded, you've checked it, then it's really not dangerous in any way. Now I am pushing bullets down into it, but there's nothing in the chamber. In fact, to get something in the chamber, I have to push the bolt forward. There's still nothing in the chamber. I'll go ahead and snap it. You're not supposed to snap 22s much, but I'll do it. There's nothing there. It takes that second time to put a round in the chamber. Notice the safety is right here. It has an unusual looking safety. It's on fire, back and forth. Okay, it's on safe, on fire. So let's put it on safe. I'll take a couple of shots. Now, another thing about this gun, of all the guns you've seen me demonstrate, this is the only gun I have that has a scope on it. I'm not big on scopes. Let's see if we can hit anything with it. I'll just shoot some stuff here close at first. You can see those two Coke cans. They're actually Sam's Coke bargains from Walmart. They make good targets. So I'll shoot the one on the right and then the one on the left, if I can hit it. Let's go across the hill, hit those other 8-inch plates. See if they'll slide. Oh, knocked him sideways. See if I can finish him off. And we've got a bowling pin or two there. See if I can hold steady enough to hit the bowling pin. Try the middle one. And the third one. I think I missed. I'm going to shoot the cowboy here. No, I'm not. Okay. All right, let's load him back up. Now, if you have not shot a scope, talk about scopes a little bit. I'm not an expert on scopes by any means. You can pretty much infer that, because this is the only gun I have with a scope on it. And I've bought a few Marlins and centerfire rifles that came with scopes, used guns, and first thing I do is take that scope off. But if you haven't shot a lot and you see a gun with a scope on it, telescope on it, rifle scope, I think there's a natural inclination there to assume that, oh, that's simple to hit anything with. Look, you've got a scope sitting on top of that gun. You could hit anything with that. That's not exactly the case unless you're bench resting it. Now, if you're locking it down on some sandbags, and you got a stool like I could do here if I wanted to, then yeah, you ought to hit about anything if your scope is on target or not. But one thing people don't realize is that this gun has to be held just as steady whether there's a scope on it or not if you're going to stand and shoot it. So it doesn't change how steady you are. If anything, it just magnifies, literally, no pun intended, it magnifies your shake. So just because you have a scope doesn't necessarily make it easier to hit something. It just makes it more obvious where the bullet's going to go and how much you are moving around. So I'm going to still try to shoot offhand over there. We've got some soft drinks over there too. There's one by that first pig, and then there's some up there between the turkeys. So I'm going to start low, close, and see if I can hit a soft drink over there. And it's a little target. All right. I'll go for the next one between the turkeys. All right. That was one up there behind the ram, right? I can't see it, but yeah. A bit low. A bit high. Yeah, okay. There's one up there by the 80-yard gong. I'm going to try for him. He's a little easier to see, maybe. If I hit him, I think you'll be able to tell. Bounced into the gong. Ah. Missed him. Okay, I'm going to shoot the gong. Ah, I needed that. Felt good. I'm going to hit him again. All right, I'm going to brace myself here, and I'm going to see if I can hit that soft drink over there by the gong. I think I have one more bullet, unfortunately. There we go. Whew. Okay. That felt good. Okay. Like I said, I am not a rifleman, and I'm not a scope shooter generally. I'm not a bench rest shooter. I really don't enjoy shooting that way that much. But if you're going to try to pick off something, that's that tall and, of course, that wide, 80 yards, even though you have a scope, it's just still really, really difficult. I was coming close, really close to him offhand, but just enough off where we weren't seeing any kind of soft drink soda explosion, right? So this is a nice rifle. One thing you might notice about it is it's very big. It's very heavy. If you saw this hanging or sitting in a gun show or a gun shop, you would at first glance think it was a 30-06 or something. It's just a really heavy rifle. And this is a rifle that lasts forever if you take care of it. It's just very, very heavy. Scope sighted. Has a 4-power scope on it. You don't want a lot of power on your scope, generally on a 22. And it's a fixed power, it's not a variable. And it is a nice rifle. It still shoots pretty much right on. After all these years, it's at least 60, 70, maybe 75 years old. It's a 47C. I've done a little research on it, and I'm sure somebody who's watching this video knows more about it than I do even. I've done enough research to know who made it and about when it was made, and what the deal is on it, why it's called a Ward's Western Field, because I remember when Montgomery Ward's and of course Sears sold guns. So very special gun, first gun I ever shot in my life. Belonged to my father. He gave it to me when I was young, so you can imagine that this one is another one of those heirlooms, 22 rifle. You very likely have something like this in your family, a 22 that you grew up with that will always mean a lot to you. So I guess I'll sign off with this gun right now, and I'm glad you could join me today.